Hi, I'm Dave Thompson and this is Hyperbright Studios. Today we're going to talk about 10 free ways to upgrade the quality and sound of your studio without spending any money whatsoever. Tip number 1. Improve the acoustics in your room. Now, sometimes this can end up costing you money, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes if you use the materials that you have available to you already, then you can improve the sound quality of your room. Like I did in the previous video where I talked about room acoustics and how using the foam bass traps that I had in my room actually helped to mitigate a notch that was in the room response. So it doesn't always cost money to improve the quality of the room. Try thinking about ways that you can do this without spending money. I've seen people record with duvets over their head to get a studio sound. There's all sorts of different hacks online for getting better acoustic treatment without you spending money or with using materials that you already have. For example, a bookshelf can be really good for diffraction, as can things like guitar racks. Unfortunately though, there is no real replacement for having really good acoustic panels in a room, though I do have another video where I talk about how to make really good acoustic panels cheaply, so it's worth checking that out. Tip number 2, make the most of natural light and the positioning of the things in your studio to make for an inspiring space. I'm really fortunate with the space that I have here because I have lots of natural light coming from this side, which really helps the room feel open and inviting. Something that I've noticed from moving into this room is the importance of natural light, and that really inspiration can come from the fact that you have that space that has that natural light coming in. It also makes filming a bit easier sometimes. Tip number 3, rearrange the things that are in your studio to make for a better working environment or more efficient working environment. For instance, in here I have my guitars that I use to the right here, and I have the students' guitars over there, which means that if they need to switch over to a new instrument, then they only have to reach for it and change it themselves, which makes things a lot easier, and it means that I'm not having to climb over to sort things out for them. I've also tried to rearrange my desk to make things easy to get to as well. I have a couple of drawers here which are full of things that are useful to me. Things like microphones or books or just things that you need to get to hand really quickly. And sometimes rack drawers like that can be really helpful for that purpose. Tip number 4, master the art of microphone placement. One of the things I come across a lot is just how much you can improve the quality of a recording by the mic positioning. In this position here, for example, I've got a Neumann KM184, but it's just at a perfect distance for me to get a really good audio balance. Sometimes I find that just backing the microphone away from the source a little bit can actually drastically improve the recording of something. I found this in the past, especially with instruments such as an accordion, for example, where backing off about a foot or 18 inches or something like that actually led to you getting a less magnified sound footprint, because sometimes you can end up focusing on things that you don't actually want. You could get too much of, say, the key pressing sound or the hammer or the percussive sound of like a hammer hitting a piano or something like that. So sometimes backing off will lead to you getting a more balanced overall tonal soundscape. This can be very true with acoustic guitars as well, where focusing too closely on one thing can not only make the performer feel uncomfortable, it can make the sound worse as well. That said, it can be a bit of a balancing act if you're recording multiple instruments at once. So you want to get a balance between sound quality and sound isolation. Tip number 5. Learn essential mixing and mastering techniques to improve the quality of your mixes and your recordings. There's tons and tons of free resources online on YouTube for you to learn how to improve your mixing and mastering. and just spending some time learning some new techniques will really pay back in dividends. Learning things like how compressors actually work, what different types of compressors are suitable for different sources, or learning, for example, what different frequencies are effective at solving different kinds of problems. You can also experiment with things like noise reduction. There's lots of methods of noise reduction out there. Things like using gates can be really effective, and you don't necessarily have to go for the same kind of noise correction or noise reduction for each task. So sometimes noise reduction can actually lead to losing a lot of top end, which you don't want to lose. A gate doesn't do that. So sometimes using a gate with a really correctly tuned attack and release time and making sure that you've got the dynamics well edited as well can make for a good result. It's also worth learning about loudness standards as well and how they impact your work. Tip number 6, discover free alternatives to things like digital audio workspaces, plugins, virtual instruments, in order to improve your workflow. There is a huge amount of free software available in the world. There's software like Reaper, for instance. Although not officially free, even the full version is only $60. It does have a perpetual "I'm still testing this" function on the first screen. It means that you can use the software forever. There's also a great list on Pro Tools Expert that has a list of free plugins and virtual instruments available for Pro Tools, but also they are available across lots of other digital audio workspaces. That's worth checking out. Tip number 7, experiment with using things like household objects as instruments. You'll be surprised how many things in your house you could potentially use as an instrument. I've even tried doing things like putting glasses with different amounts of water in to achieve different pitches. I've tried doing things like striking matches. I've tried using pots, pans, all sorts of different things that might just get an interesting texture. You can also do things like you can pitch shift these instruments so they don't sound like the original instrument that they were. Tip number 8. Rethink your cable management by tidying things up in a way that makes for a better workflow or increases the functionality of your studio. So when I've set up the studio here, I had a bit of a rethink about where I was able to access power. I had a rethink about, for example, the tape machine that is behind me is now connected into the audio interface at all time and easy to use. And one of the reasons I didn't use it before was because it wasn't connected up and it would have been difficult to use. Now it's much easier to access and more likely to use it. Also things like I've got a little Vox amp here that's always connected in, so that's much easier to use now. I've also got hidden underneath my desk a USB hub which makes it easier to add in other devices. That's all going through to one cable into my laptop, which means that I can save space on my desk without having a big USB hub on the desk, and it also means that I can add in extra things. Another example of which is the piano, which I didn't have connected in all of the time, and now it is. So I've been able to add two things, the piano and the tape machine, to my rig without actually spending any money, just by rethinking the cable management. Tip number 9, reuse everyday items and DIY soundproofing tools to improve the quality of your recordings. There's all sorts of ways you can do this. Have a look around your house and think, what things can I use that could potentially improve the sound of my room? Really be imaginative, experiment. If you do have the facility to do testing and see what improves the sound of your room, then go ahead, use it. Anything that you can do without spending money to improve the quality of your recordings is a good use of your time in my book. Tip number 10, constantly educate yourself. There is a wealth of information available on YouTube, and I always try and keep myself up to date with new trends, new technology, new plugins, new equipment, and I always try and keep an eye out on what's there. because you never know, there might be something that's quite reasonably priced that will actually completely change your workflow in a really, really positive way. And it's worth keeping an eye on what's going on with technology. However, there's also an endless wealth of tips available out there for you to improve the quality of your recordings without you spending any money. By implementing these 10 tips, you can drastically improve the quality of your recordings without spending a single penny. Take your sound quality to new heights and watch your creativity flourish. Don't wait any longer. Start improving your recording studio today. For more exciting tips, please show your appreciation for the channel. Like and share this video with other fellow musicians or studio owners that could benefit from these improvements. And stay tuned for more content coming your way. Bye bye.